welcome to the stage CEO of Bloomberg Philanthropies, Patty Harris.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. So great to see everyone this morning. I'm so proud to kick things off today. Before I do, I want to thank Jim Anderson and Lauren Rudifer from our wonderful Bloomberg team. Thank you. And I also want to recognize Dan Porterfield and his team at the Aspen Institute. It's been great to see so many familiar faces these past few days, and I've had the privilege of getting to meet so many new ones. We hope you've been enjoying the time and that you've had a chance to explore this amazing city. 13 years ago, we hosted our first CityLab with a single goal: to create a credible space for local leaders to learn about the best in innovation and to help create great ideas spread all throughout the world. Because, as Mike Bloomberg always says, great ideas can come from anywhere and anyone. We've seen that time and again. It's happened so many times. Mayors sharing tips with each other, working together, and smart new programs have been created. So much innovation springs from this week's event, and it's always interesting to be part of it. But we encourage everyone to keep talking. I think you've heard this before. We've said this a few times. The work really begins once we leave the conference, get to know each other better, not just in Madrid, but really wherever you are when you go home. We also encourage you to reach out and get to know partners outside of your city hall, especially young people. Over the years, the team at Bloomberg Philanthropies has seen the impact that empowering the next generation can have across many, many issues, including climate change. And so, in 2023, with some incredible partners, we launched the Youth Climate Action Fund at COP28 in Dubai. The fund supported local leaders who worked with young people on projects that help tackle climate change in their home communities. We then selected 98 winning cities in 34 countries, which engaged more than 300,000 youth along the way, and the impact was really extraordinary. They planted more than 235,000 trees in 1.8 million plants. We like to count everything at Bloomberg Philanthropies. They developed nearly 5,000 gardens, launched more than 266 composting stations, and collected more than 400,000 pounds of trash and recyclables, just to give you a few specific examples. When a category, and now I'm going to give you a few other really specific examples. When a Category 5 hurricane in Montego Bay in Jamaica came, young people kept a community center running for weeks using their solar power project. In Hobart, Australia, the Next Generation mobilized residents to plant 400 endangered native trees, strengthening the city's resilience all over to protect from the wildfires. In Quentamahara, Mozambique, participants built a smart waste system that reduced trash overflow by nearly 30% and kept neighborhoods cleaner. We were so impressed by all of this creativity that came out of this program, we knew we had to do more. So last year, I was very proud to be there. In Brazil, during COP30, we announced Youth Climate Action Fund 2.0, and we invited more cities to apply. Today, I am so pleased to share we've selected 300 cities. That's right. We're going to triple the number of cities we work with and tripling our impact. Very exciting. Each winning city will receive funding for youth-created projects that address local climate needs. This program will continue to make a huge difference. It offers city halls more hands-on in the fight against climate change. It helps show leaders that there is brilliant and innovative ideas just outside of government waiting to happen. And evaluations have shown that those who are participated in this program walked away with more trust and confidence in government. And I think that's really, really encouraging. Long before I was privileged to be first deputy mayor in New York City, I had my own early experience in public service, which really changed my life trajectory. When I was in high school, I worked for my congressman, Ed Koch, and I answered phones, and I handled constituent comments, maybe complaints, a little of everything. And I tried to soak up as much knowledge as I could, and it really instilled in me a lifelong passion for public service. So I know that these kind of experiences and these kind of programs really, we hope, will do the same for so many others and change the course, not only of helping the planet and the environment, but really also motivating young people. So as you can see, we're really, really excited about this program, the impact it's going to have, the partnership it's going to have, and the great bridge between city halls and others around their cities. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great day and enjoy the conference.
Good morning, CityLab. Morning. Well, we've all just heard the great news from Patty Harris on the Youth Climate Action Fund, and I'm so glad to be here with you today to talk more about the power of young people to shape the future of our cities. I'm Kali Aset Amen, the Civic Engagement Director at the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation at Johns Hopkins, which makes this a particularly exciting conversation for me. At BCPI, we are developing an evidence base and framework for results-driven civic engagement that endeavors to strengthen government effectiveness. And across the world, we are seeing that young people have powerful ideas, not just to inspire us to do better, but ideas that are actually moving policy and driving innovation in local government. But realizing that potential sometimes requires moving beyond traditional engagement. It depends on cities building the capacity and capabilities to work with residents as true co-creators of solutions. So to share some of those strategies, I have a wonderful group of panelists here today. I'm joined by Mayor Francis Namayanja, who'll discuss real-world examples of embedding youth involvement inside government. Heidi Tejera will offer insight about what governments can do, not only to get young people to show up, but to draw them into creative public problem solving. Montserrat Montagut will explain how to cultivate a civic mindset at an early age and how that early investment can shape long-term civic participation. So let's get into it. Mayor Namayanja, you've done something remarkable in Masaka, Uganda. You established a youth desk aimed at helping young Ugandans access government programs and essential services more efficiently, and of course, to gather intelligence that serves your mayoral priorities. How has creating the youth desk shaped the way you lead and govern?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I'll take you through how it started. I am 65 years old, and I have a population, 70% of the population are young people. I found a disconnect between the administration in my city and the young people. And I was thinking how I can bridge this gap. So I established a youth desk headed by a lady, a youth, and I wanted to see how we can share ideas with the young people. The youth desk is intended for the youth to feel free to come to the mayor's office and interact and give feedback. Out of their many recommendations and requests, we made a first youth convention. And from this, we realized that youth need placement, those who come from universities in terms of internship, training, and mentorship. When this was realized, we were able to establish their talents through the youth desk. And now some of their talents are embedded in the different departments. They have applied for these jobs and recruited. They become decision makers in the city.
Mayor Namayanja, you've also very actively engaged young people in making Masaka a clean, green, and livable city, as you often say. Tell us a bit about the citywide impact of that kind of engagement and why that was so important to you.
Yes, when I became mayor in the year 2021, my city was elevated from municipality to city status. And I found a backlog of waste. The youth joined me voluntarily to work on the cleaning exercise because my goal is having a clean, green, livable city. Here I want to thank everybody who gave me support, especially Bloomberg, when they came up with the Youth Action Fund, which has boosted the youth. They are no longer volunteers. We formed associations, and they've been tendered by the city to collect garbage. They are now business co-creators and co-governors of their own projects. Thank you so much, Bloomberg. Thank you so much, the Alliance of City Mayors, African Alliance of City Mayors, and everybody for their support.
I'm so glad you brought up the Youth Climate Action Fund, because now I want to draw Heidi into the conversation. Heidi, you serve as a regional coach for the Youth Climate Action Fund, which does such a great job, we know, at helping city governments experiment with new approaches to climate challenges, while also fostering trust between young people and government. From your experience, what makes a youth engagement model like YCAF actually work, and what tends to undermine it?
Thank you, Kalia said. Well, more than any activity, what makes youth model engagement last are the relationships and the structure behind it. In many places, youth participation is a one-time project, something disconnected from real decision-making processes. But engagement is not about inviting them. It's about rebuilding that relationship and that's exactly what the Youth Climate Action Fund does. Like Patty Harris said, this program puts young people at the center, not as participants, but as leaders. And from what we have seen during these 2 years, models that last are built on a few common choices. First, cities are working with young people on real challenges, and climate action has been a powerful entry point because it's urgent and affects directly young people. Second, cities give youth a real role, like in this photo from Cuenca, Ecuador, one of the cities I coach in round 1 and 2. The city partner student leaders and university federations to spread the program across all campuses to reach many more young people. Youth in this program are also co-designing, managing budgets, implementing projects, making decisions, and that kind of autonomy creates real ownership. And third, the mayor's role. We have seen that when mayors are truly involved, when they visit projects, talk to young people, it sends a powerful message that this work matters, and the engagement and the motivation increases significantly. And last, cities need to build trust because young people are willing to participate, but only if they can trust the institutions and the processes. And that means clear communication, transparency, and preparing to tell always what is going on and following it on through commitments. Yes, and when cities get this right, something shifts, and young people are no longer participants; they become partners.
Well, and let me offer just a really, really quick follow-up, and then we'll move on to Montserrat. But what kinds of skills, in turn, do young people need to build in order to engage effectively in that way?
When cities invite young people to co-create solutions, they begin to develop some skills, but this doesn't happen spontaneously. It requires intentional support. And in my experience, there are 3 core capacities that makes this possible. And those are the ability to move from ideas to concrete solutions. And they are learning in this program how to design something actionable, thinking about feasibility, budgets, timelines, and impact. The second ability is communication and storytelling. They are learning how to explain their ideas clearly, why it is important, who its benefits, and how it connects to city priorities. And the last one is they learn to navigate complexity, because working with governments means understanding processes, adapting to constraint, and collaborating with many different departments or stakeholders. And a great example of that is the city of Quillota, Chile, where the city team designed a program, a leadership program, to strengthen the skills of the youth leaders. And what is important for cities to understand is that these are not just youth skills, these are civic capacities. And when young people develop them early, cities are not just implementing projects, they are investing in the future of their own governance.
I love that, and Montserrat is also doing that in Catalonia, where you've really leaned into deep engagement with younger students around the ages of 10 to 13. How do you prepare them so early on to become real contributors, not just beneficiaries?
Well, first of all, as you know, education is essential. I think that it is one of the most valuable investments we can do. So in our school district in Catalonia, we recently published a new curriculum for basic education, which is a key competence, which is civic competence. So that means that we need to train our teachers in order so that can help our students to acquire all these competencies that they need for this world. So in order to become these engaged citizens that we want, so they can make a positive change in our communities and in our society. So I'm talking about civic understanding, global awareness, appreciation for diversity across borders, for instance, even democratic participation as well. And of course, our teachers do that through their classrooms, but we also implement innovation programs. For instance, Global Scholars is an excellent program, an education program which is from Global Cities, which is part of Bloomberg Philanthropies as well. And they have a digital platform where our students can connect and interact with their peers in other countries, more than 39 countries around the world. So you can imagine thousands of young students are debating about global challenges like climate change, but also sustainability of cities, and also about water scarcity or healthy food, for instance. And so behind the program are part of our very quality curriculum and high quality contents. So the thing is that our students learn to do things doing things. So they watch at their own communities, they see what doesn't work there, what they can do, and they propose a plan, a project, what we call a community action project. And they pick up ideas from the colleagues in international context, because you know challenges don't recognize borders. So once they have done that, they present it to the local authorities. And you know, in many cases, they said, wow, what a wonderful project, let's do that. So they supported these ideas, and they implemented them. And so they made a positive change for the communities as well.
I love that. We're going to have to leave it there. You all have had such rich experiences. Please reach out to these wonderful panelists to learn more. Everyone's caffeinated and hydrated. Nadia Calvino, I'm so happy to speak to you. It's really wonderful to be here with you and everyone at CityLab. Now, as many people in the room, of course, know, city leaders can drive some pretty extraordinary change at the local level given the right resources. And cities, guess what? They always need more resources. So I'd love to explore with you, first of all, President Calvino, how the European Investment Bank partners with all cities around the world to drive change, but also why you think cities are so important in this day and age.
Absolutely. You know, in these days when we are surrounded by volatility, uncertainty, and conflict, city mayors are really focused on delivering for their citizens. They're focused on delivering clean water, education, which has heard the importance of these investments, housing, collection of garbage, recycling of the garbage from the cities. They're really superheroes. They're really anchored to reality, and I think it's amazing that there's so many of them here in the room, and the energy, you can feel this energy, this positive energy that can change the world. And I'm really proud that the European Investment Bank is a key partner to cities. 1 out of 4 euros that we finance goes to cities, and we are absolutely committed to continue to go on that direction.
And it's also, President Calvino, at the city level that you can also do some resilience against some of the geopolitics that are all in flux.
Well, absolutely, because most of the population lives in cities, most of the population is going to live in the cities. So these are the places where challenges appear, but also where opportunities appear. And the power of cities, the innovative power of people getting together is amazing. Absolutely, we need to bet on these cities being also livable places where ideas and people's prospects and dreams can prosper.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the money, that the numbers involved. So
Bloomberg, we have to talk about
once
money.
Bloomberg, always Bloomberg. Over the past 15 years, the bank has provided over 80 billion euros in financing and advisory services for urban projects, from sustainable urban transport to affordable housing and the circular economy. So how do you think about your next projects, and how do you think about investing?
Indeed, because one of the specialties of the European Investment Bank is not only we don't only bring money, but we bring expertise. Because we have done so many projects in public transport or water supply that we can tell a city, well, this works, this doesn't work. And that expertise is also very important because it mobilizes private investment. It brings other investors into those very bankable and sustainable projects. And I'm really happy to see, I was able to visit one of these flagship projects, and yesterday I saw the mayor of Lisbon, and he was so happy. And he told me the European Investment Bank was there at the beginning. You have been with us all through this project. We're building these tunnels to prevent flood impact in the city. I visited it a month ago or so. I was so proud, you know, that European money is actually bringing that resilience to such a beautiful city as Lisbon.
Yeah, I mean, Lisbon is pretty extraordinary. So we have images, right? Because I'd like to hear a little bit more about exactly what this project in Lisbon was about and why it worked. So I think we have images that should be right behind. You can see them there.
Yes, this is, as you know, there were very dramatic floods in Portugal and also the south of Spain this year. And Lisbon was already partly protected from the impact of these floods thanks to these infrastructures that have been built in the last years. And it is quite impressive how the mayor also had the vision that we need to build an infrastructure which will be resilient for 100 years. Be able to protect the city whenever there's a flood, also ensure clean water. They will also have hydropower energy. So it's really a combo, you know, this project. And I was really impressed to see how fast the project is being built and happy to provide the finance.
How do you ensure, I mean, this is another picture. I mean, this is like, millions and millions, actually, of project being needed. How do you ensure that the green transition doesn't widen the gap between the wealthy and the municipalities that don't have as much?
Indeed, from the European Investment Bank, we're proud to say we are the climate bank, and 60% of our finance is going to the green transition, whether it is transport, water infrastructures, deployment of renewables, energy grids. And what I see, Francine, is that beyond all these high-level political debates, the reality on the ground is that companies are investing in this green transition, and mayors are very well aware of the need to invest for the future and to protect their citizens. It's about safety and security at the end of the day.
Nadia, how do you measure success, actually, and when or where does profit come in?
Oh, that's a very good question. We're very fortunate to have an institution that was created many years ago with a little capital injection by the at the time there were not 27 member states, but the member states of the European Union, and we have been profitable since. So what we do is we reinvest these profits. We're a non-profit institution. So last year it was around 3 billion euros. So that is put into reserves, and that allows us to leverage, to borrow money in capital markets with very low interest rates that we pass on to our clients. I see the mayor of Zagreb there, a very good client. You know how good.
That deserves a round of applause.
Yeah, absolutely. And he knows, and mayors that work with us, they know we can provide long-term loans up to 30 years. We can provide low interest rates, very good conditions, because we're not for profit. And so our aim is really making a difference on the ground. But you're right to say, how do you measure impact? When I see these projects and I know that this city is going to be more resilient and the quality of life of citizens is going to improve, that is the real project. That is the real impact of our money.
I mean, housing also remains one of these major pain points for many cities around the world. I don't know if we can have a show of hands of who's, worried about housing or thinking about housing, but there's going to be a lot of hands up. So what are the objectives, and how many cities participate in some of your great initiatives at the EIB?
Indeed, and that's one of the things that I also changed when I joined the EIB, because we were not so active in an area which is primarily a municipal responsibility, a local and regional responsibility, but we have really scaled up our support in 3 areas. It's new build, but it is also renovation of the existing stock and innovation, so that we can develop new techniques, new building materials to make houses faster and cheaper. And we have increased our financing. This year our target is 6 billion euros for housing. And this week we will be signing an important deal with the city of Berlin. I don't know if there are representatives from Germany here, but it is the largest financing project that we have provided to Germany for the past 10 years, and it has to do with building affordable housing in Berlin. Because it all starts with a home, doesn't it? So when you're a person, when you're a young family, you need a home to be able to fulfill your dreams. That's very clear. And we're there to support cities on that front too.
Looking ahead, how much funding does the EIB have available for urban investment projects?
We finance around 100 billion euros a year, and 25% of it goes to cities in one way or another. It is mostly in Europe, but it is also around the world, from financing metros in India, clean water in Africa, connectivity in Latin American cities. We try also to bring European expertise so that those lessons learned throughout history here in European cities can also be translated to other cities around the world.
How is funding awarded? You know, you were saying, like, what makes a good client for the EIB?
Well, obviously, a good client is one that pays back. Fortunately, we're very lucky that our non-performance exposures are extremely low. They're below 1% of our portfolio. We're very careful about who we lend to, but also what projects we finance. That's why this technical assistance I was referring to is so important, to make sure that the projects are bankable, that they will be able to repay the loan, and well, of course we have very favorable conditions which make these kind of projects also develop, able to be implemented on the ground. Because one challenge that I'm sure mayors in the city in the meeting will acknowledge, and maybe it's not so much talked about, is about the political cycles. Because many of these investments go beyond one political cycle, and although successful mayors are able to stay there for 2 or 3 times and 15 years, but many are saying, well, why do I embark in a project that I will not be able to see completed? So this technical assistance, I think, is extremely important also to see what can be delivered short term and how we do things in phases that can also support, these long-term endeavors.
So in the 20 seconds that we have left, how can cities apply?
Well, we have offices around the world. The European Union offices are good contact points. Of course, in the European Union, we have offices in the 27 member states, and we're always ready to explore, to study, and if possible, to support good projects.
President Calvino, thank you so much. Thank you for
Thanks to you. You're superheroes.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, just a massive thank you. I think this is 13 years of CityLab that we've seen, and how the agenda of cities has been put on the table by Bloomberg, Jim, Patty, and many others. So firstly, just want to start with a thank you. I also want to actually just open up a conversation of what I think one of the big challenges that we face over the next period. Cities are now no longer just dealing with the transformation to a net zero cities future. Cities are going to have to deal with volatility. Cities are going to have to deal with a scale of crisis that I think has been unprecedented. Many of you, if you've been following what's been going on in the Straits of Hormuz, you will be worrying about nutrition and food system risks to cities. Cape Town, if you look back, you'd be looking at water continuity risks. And if you look forward, you're almost certainly, hopefully, worrying about labor shock risks. The scale of these risks is no longer marginal. It's not about incremental losses, but it's actually about some of the structural risks that we face. And increasingly, the conversations that we're part of are starting to say, this is going to put together a whole new demand for how cities respond. We already saw the introduction of need for infrastructure scale thinking, moving away from project-based thinking to large-scale infrastructure. But these infrastructures are not going to be simple single projects, but whole portfolios of projects required to respond. I want to use one example, and I think this is sobering when we start to look at the stats. When people talk about 3-degree futures, and by the way, we're now more likely up to between 3.8 to 4-degree futures. That's what the current data is driving us towards. That means close to 8 degrees inland, and places like Madrid being at 47.5 degrees in summer. Now, those are just numbers, easy numbers for me to throw away. What do they really mean? In real lives, they mean number of accidents go up, heat-related accidents. It means GDP losses. It means maintenance costs go up. It means domestic violence goes up. So these numbers aren't just single point failure points, transformers. Inequality goes up because the effects of inequality disproportionately impact those that are poorer and more vulnerable. That volatility sits on your balance sheet as city leaders. And what I'm trying to say is the scale of transformation is now moving from project-based interventions to critical infrastructure scale transformation requirements. And that starts to open up a new form of demand. And a demand for transformation that I think is going to invite new pressures, but also invite new ways of looking at it. Yes, EIB has been brilliant and starting to structure infrastructure scale projects, but you're going to need portfolios of interventions to deal with it. Portfolios of intervention at scale and order in different ways. But recognizing the responses, the scale of responses and scale of risks are in every location. I don't know if you've done the modeling on cascading risks, and Juan and various others in Madrid have, you start to see that this is transformers, road management, failures of the aquifer system. So the aquifer system in Madrid, for example, is brilliant, very powerful. Yet we know rainfall patterns are changing. And the rainfall patterns means that the aquifer recharge is slowing or becoming more difficult. So whilst the net water available is the same, actually our ability to store and reserve it and be able to use it in moments of heat crisis becomes more difficult. That requires infrastructure scale responses, and we're seeing this not just here, but also places like Dartmoor in the UK. And at this moment in time, none of us are talking about AMOC collapse results, which have gone from being 10% to nearly 50% in terms of implications. So when you look across the risk profile, you start to see a different type of risk profile. And Madrid and cities like Madrid are doing really interesting things about this all over the location in different ways. And we also recognize that there is no single active response. So in order to be able to respond to this scale of crisis, yes, you need a whole forest to be built around Madrid. Yes, you need effectively all green roofs. Yes, you need community energy. Yes, you need new forms of responses, mystifiers across every street, giving rainbows across every street to be able to provide the cooling in critical points, all the way to how you treat roads. But those are just the surface level responses. And this is one of my big messages. No longer can a single infrastructure provision give you the response. You're going to need a portfolio of interventions which go from community to startups to infrastructure as a whole portfolio response. That requires, like our friends at EIB, to start to fund portfolios of projects which go from community work all the way through to hard infrastructure, recognizing the benefits are all the way from GVA benefits all the way and above. The whole stack. That requires an integrated provision that is historically not been usual for us to be able to do. And when we start to look at this, this requires different forms of capabilities. No longer can this be all funded by the city balance sheet by itself. This requires a pooling of risk. How do you bring the real asset owners and the liability owners together in different formats? That is a form of leadership that's the only way to fund what I would say is billions of worth of investment that's required to be able to stabilize our cities. That requires a new response for innovation, because this risk profile is not a single lumpy object. It's a risk profile that's volatile and dynamically increasing. So what you need to be able to do is provision dynamically relative to the risks. This requires moving us away from traditional project engineering models to portfolio engineering models relative to risk. It requires us to have new types of investment funds, which are able to finance this stuff with new forms of facilities, which are pooled facilities, acting and being able to allocate for non-direct returns of capital, not just direct returns of capital. That portfolio requires an integrated model. And as we look through this, what this also starts to throw up is that the adaptation strategies are no longer just adaptation. They are fundamentally about preserving continuity. And I think unless we start to understand the severity of not the last 13 years, but the next 13 years, I think this is about existential risk. The numbers I typically use are London has, I think, 3.8 million homes. Each home on average is 668,000. If London becomes unlivable, which, by the way, if we lose the Arctic, it does become unlivable because we're at 4.5 meters rise of level, the total value at risk is 2.52 trillion. So the economics of adaptation become fundamentally different. This is not about incremental risk management. This is about managing total value at risk in a fundamentally different way. Now, being conscious of time, this opens up Madrid having become, and places like Madrid, to become a platform for this activity all the way through. So how do you become a platform for capability formation? Like I say, this is about communities, startups, infrastructure provision, supply chain provision. It's not enough to invest in new home demand. You've got to invest in the new supply chains for those homes. We need to start to invest in an integrated format through that landscape. And this requires us to build the capability, the comprehension for citizens to be able to participate into this reality. The demand construction is an investment. It is not a cost. If you can't construct the legitimacy on the ground, you cannot construct the participation. And as we move forward, this, I think, opens up a new form of capability. Capabilities that cities around the world will need to build to be able to address the scale of risks that we're starting to face. And I think this, I propose, as a bit of provocation, is perhaps the next 13 years of the Bloomberg intervention space, because I think it's going to be of that order and that invitation. I want to thank you. Thank you.
My name is Jenny Kane. I oversee the career and technical education portfolio at Bloomberg Philanthropies. Thanks so much for having us. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we're committed that students have multiple options and opportunities to enter high-growth, high-wage jobs. In the US, a lot of students are faced with four-year college or nothing, and we believe that students who may not want to go directly to four-year college should have options to get high-growth, high-wage jobs through internship, apprenticeship, and industry-recognized credentials. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we've launched a series of initiatives to help young people to connect to those jobs. We launched a healthcare high school project in 2024, which has created 13 healthcare high schools around the United States that directly connect hospital systems with thousands of open jobs to high school students who have the opportunity to get paid work-based learning experience and industry-recognized credentials to go directly into those jobs after they graduate from high school, serving over 8,000 students. Oh, thank you. But in many countries many places around the country, this work has been going on for a very long time. And apprenticeship and internship and going directly into the workforce is something that's really built into the system. So excited today to talk to some international experts, as well as my colleague from Boston, to really delve into what those opportunities are for students and how cities specifically can connect young people to industry. So I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves and explain a little bit about the context where they're from for career and technical education.
Hi everyone, I work at ETH in Zurich. We study education systems and work together with countries that want to strengthen the link between education and the labor market, particularly through vocational education and training. So I come from Switzerland, and as you may know or may not know, 70% of young individuals choose a dual education track. And that means that they spend 3 to 4 days per week in a company. So they have a direct bridge from education into the labor market, and this is one of the key elements or reasons for why Switzerland has such a low youth unemployment rate. And today I'm happy to be here to share my insights on what we have learned over the years about VET.
Well, thanks. Well, I'm Ricardo Espinosa, and I lead the VET work at the OECD, and I also manage PISA-VET, which is an OECD initiative, and it's the first large-scale assessment to measure competences acquired through vocational education and training. So before we get into that, I think it's important to clarify a little bit the terminology here, because what you know, for example, as CTE in the US is typically known as VET, or vocational education and training in Europe, but the principle is essentially the same: to train people, students for work through typically very practical and occupation-specific programs which have a very strong work-based component. And the differences between Europe, the US, and other parts of the world are pretty big. So for example, in Europe, this is basically targeting students between 15 and 19-year-old who have to choose between a vocational track and an academic track. But in other places like the US or Latin America, for example, this is much more toward the tertiary level where people are trained in community colleges and in a different setting, more like university setting. So I think that is important to start our discussion.
Great.
And hi, I'm Mike Firestone, and I'm the Corporation Counsel, the General Counsel for the City of Boston, but I've been a lead partner on behalf of our mayor, Michelle Wu, in building a new high school in Boston, which has the oldest public school system in the United States. We're working closely with Bloomberg Philanthropies, the incredible education team, to reimagine what secondary school looks like in our city, starting with a collaboration with our largest employer, Mass General Brigham, one of the great healthcare systems in the United States, along the lines that Jenny just described. So we're just delighted to be part of this collaboration.
Great. So first I just want to talk about sort of like cultural differences. So in the US, going directly into the workforce is often viewed as less prestigious than going to four-year college, which discourages students from going into these programs. So how does that perception differ across different countries? And how can we make it more just a viable option for students and not a choice?
So whether a program is attractive is usually the outcome of the program itself. So you first need to make sure that the program that results in these results that you want to see, and that the outcomes are truly better for the students. So then the next question is, what makes a program good? And I have 3 key principles that I want to have you as a takeaway when you think about designing a program. So the first one, and this is the most important one, is work-based learning. You really need to expose the learner to the workplace. Students need to be in a company so that they can learn the skills that they need to become the professional that they want to become. Then the second one is you need to make sure that the program leads to recognized qualifications. So this is very important for the students because they want to show what kind of skills they have, and it needs to be transparent. This is also important for the firm because that way they can actually see what the apprentice can bring to the company. And the third one, which is also very important, is permeability. So you don't want to have any dead ends. So if students complete a vocational education and training program, they need to be able to change careers later, to have access to higher education. So in Switzerland, we have that. We have a very permeable system, but students don't go to the universities. We have different programs for them that are also on the tertiary level. So for example, we have universities of applied sciences. And what research shows is that students that went to the universities of applied sciences, and they also get a bachelor's or a master's, they actually have better outcomes than the students from universities. So they have higher salaries after graduation, they have a lower risk of unemployment, and they are faster to find a job.
Great.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But first, I like to say that it is very tempting when we talk about perception to think about a communication problem, right? And all communication and rebranding, for example, can help. It's not always the solution. So I think that quality definitely precedes perception, right? And if we don't improve quality, there's nothing we can do in terms of communication, right? And most of the time, when there's a bad reputation attached to a program, it's typically because the program has earned it, right? So we need to work on the quality first. And working at UCD, we've collected a lot of information and experience about what makes a vet program or a vet system of high quality, and then work based on that. And I totally agree with Amela. So I think, first of all, you have the recognition of the qualification. It has to be meaningful for students, but also for employers. You need to allow to go to the labor market then. Of course, the work-based learning, and that is not only true in Switzerland, but what we see consistently across OECD countries is that students that go through programs with a strong work-based learning component, they do much better in the labor market. They find a job easier, they get higher salaries, and they have more fruitful careers. And finally, the permeability. I totally agree with that. I think the dead ends, it is a problem these days in most vet systems, right? So the idea is not to force families and students to choose to go to college or to choose a vocational education, but basically you have to offer them a different route for the sort of same broad range of possible destinations. And I think that is the challenge. I think qualifications framework help a lot, like interconnecting the education systems, like vocational and basic education helps a lot. And I think successful systems have worked to manage all these challenges.
We're really shifting the value proposition. For students, they're guaranteed a job from this healthcare system upon graduation. They're going to have a credential that they can take with them. They're going to have college credits that they can take with them. And we expect most students, whether they enter the workforce directly or not, are going to continue to work while learning over the course of their career. And that's how these career pathways are designed. And for the employer, we're also shifting that value proposition because they're co-creating the curriculum with the Boston Public Schools. So we're tremendously excited about this project to catalyze sort of a reimagining of secondary education across the system.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing, if we can leave mayors and city leaders with something, is that this really needs to involve the employers. This has to be employer-led and driven. This really has to end in a job. For far too long in the United States, a lot of schools have just had a sort of focus area, but it has not actually been connected to open real jobs. And if the employer is helping to design, create, and inform the work of the school, what the exact credentials are needed, then they are obviously more willing to hire directly from the system. If students have worked in that system while they're in high school, then they have that direct experience to go into the system. And obviously healthcare in the US has thousands of open jobs that are not going to be automated in the near term. Your x-ray tech still needs to be your x-ray tech or your phlebotomist, but these are jobs that have long-term pathways that the healthcare system can also invest in, so you can continue to get additional credentials and degrees over time that the hospital system will actually pay for, so there's no cost to students. So that sort of goes into the last question, which is really, how do we engage employers? And we've talked a little bit about showing them the value proposition, showing them the ROI, that you're going to get people into your system. But how, in the Swiss system and in other European countries, do you engage employers to really understand that?
It all goes back to work-based learning. If the apprentice is a substantial amount of time of the training in the company, then the company has an incentive to have a say at the table and to tell them, hey, this is the skills that I need. If you only have an apprentice for, let's say, 2 weeks or 3 weeks per year, then you don't have time to deal with that. And in Switzerland, actually, employers are heavily engaged in that because they get the apprentice such a large amount of time. And students actually are productive during the program. So companies make a profit out of offering apprenticeship positions.
No, I like to say that in most countries, including OECD countries, of course, employer engagement is very performative, right? So you invite employers, you form a board, and then you invite it to a couple of meetings, you offer them a nice lunch, you meet twice a year, and that's it, right? So I think that the paradigm here is to shift from consultation to co-design, as you well said. And that is difficult, right? And I think the second one is the return. You need to offer them something in exchange, right? So they need to see a return. And typically, trainees offer a very good value for companies, right? So you get people trained in the skills that you need. And I think here, with city mayors, I think there's a great opportunity for cities because you have a very strong convening power, and getting to know employers and institutions, I think it's what makes you powerful in this equation. So I would definitely urge you to exercise this convening power and take the most out of employers and institutions.
I agree. Our mayors having these conversations with the leadership of the healthcare system and then asking the teams to directly engage, and that's been critical.
Yeah, I think that if, we'll just leave you with this, that if the mayors, city leaders can use like their convening power to bring together employers to really understand the value proposition, if you have real talent shortages, this is where you can find that talent and then make that, that process easier for them to engage. I think that's the key to making this work. All right, we're already out of time. Thanks so much.
Good morning. I'm Dashani Argos, and my company, Ray, builds multifamily residential projects across the United States. It is a great honor to be here with so many leaders shaping the future of our cities. As developers, we are all operating within the reality of housing shortages and affordability needs. We need to build more units and fast. That's essential. But there's another challenge we must address alongside these. How do people live well in these buildings? That's what I'm going to focus on today. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can design not just for efficiency, but for connection, not as an afterthought, but as part of the core infrastructure of how a building functions. As we all know, people are increasingly disconnected. You may remember that in 2023, the US Surgeon General declared a public health crisis, citing that over 50% of adults are experiencing measurable loneliness. Loneliness is more than just a bad feeling. Chronic loneliness is strongly linked to depression, anxiety, and has serious physical implications, including increased risk of cardiovascular disease and even early mortality. Having spent my career working in the arts, I have seen firsthand how compelling a solution it can be to this epidemic. But art accessibility doesn't need to be confined to museums and galleries. It can and should be integrated into our everyday lives and the places that we live. That is why I founded Ray. Art should be as essential to our design of living spaces as HVAC systems, not as decoration, but as a functional tool for connection. In Daisy Fancourt's 2026 book, Art Cure, she uses scientific research to show that people who engage in the arts, even once a month, have about half the risk of developing depression. The arts affect every major system in the body, the brain, immune, cardiovascular, endocrine, and more. It's not about aesthetics, it's about whole body health. And if art was a drug, we would prescribe it daily. So, how do we turn this into action? With everybody looking down at their phones at all times, it's become socially acceptable to ignore the person standing right next to you, and increasingly difficult for two neighbors to have a simple conversation. But when you add a third presence, something shifts. I think of this as a kind of triangulation, a simple but very powerful design principle. In our buildings, that third factor is the deliberate, immersive presence of the arts. Art, design, installation, performance give people something to react to comment on, to share. They can soften an interaction. This creates an easy entry point. Instead of talking directly to each other, people are often talking through something else, and that makes the connection feel more organic. And by creating residential buildings where art and creativity are part of everyday life, we can create a shared experience, a real sense of belonging, in ways that are both scalable and repeatable. So across Ray buildings, we integrate the arts in three main ways. First, each building includes a site-specific installation by a major artist, something permanent that becomes part of the DNA of the building and creates a reference point for the residents. Alongside that, the walls of the building are home to a wide range of artists that are both local and international, and what matters is creating a dialogue between global and local perspectives and making that felt in everyday life. Second, we dedicate space in every building to rotating exhibitions by local artists. These are thoughtfully curated spaces that play a very active role in the life of the building. And these exhibition doors are open to everyone, the whole city. So by inviting the neighborhood in, people who might not otherwise have met now have a point of collision. So it actually becomes a gathering place for residents, the artists, the local business owners, neighbors. And these exhibits, of course, also give visibility and support to the local creative communities. Third, through intentional arts programming. We do ceramics workshops, small group classes, collaborative making sessions, so people sit side by side and create with their hands. And these programs are consistently the most popular for our residents. They give people a reason to step out of their apartment and engage in a very natural way simply by creating side by side with their neighbors. And this three-tiered approach is vital. The major commission creates a sense of identity and permanence, while the exhibitions and programming keep the space dynamic and evolving. And together, they make art feel both significant and accessible, something that you live with, not just something you visit. Ray emerged from my earlier experience founding the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art in Moscow. I noticed that deliberate, innovative architecture, proximity to the arts, performance, exposure to new ideas created something magical. People behave differently in this environment. I saw it within myself. People stayed longer, they were more open to engaging with one another. The presence of art in this form changed behavior. An example of this is our New York City project, Ray Harlem. Through our partnership with the National Black Theater, what began as a desire to rebuild the theater became an opportunity to introduce a residential space above it. Together, we created a shared ecosystem where culture and daily life reinforce each other. Today, Ray Harlem is fully occupied, and even before the theater rebuild is complete, we're already seeing benefits of this transformation. In Philadelphia, where Ray is anchored by a rotating exhibition space, we've seen the same thing. We've had very high engagement, strong occupancy, low turnover, and a real community formation. We're bringing this approach to Phoenix, which just opened, soon Nashville, and other cities in the United States. The relationship between development and cultural and nonprofit organizations doesn't always have to be purely philanthropic. It can be mutually beneficial. Developers gain authentic engagement and identity. Cultural organizations gain space, visibility, and resources. And cities gain stronger, more connected communities. What excites me most is not just the individual buildings, but it's the possibility of scale. My hope is that this way of thinking about space as a social and cultural resource, about integrating art into everyday life, about programming as infrastructure, can be adopted across neighborhoods, districts, and entire cities. Because ultimately, all of us have the ability to shape not just skylines, but modern society, to create environments where people don't just live, but actually connect, create, and feel a real sense of belonging. And if we begin to think of connection as something we can design for, not just hope for, we can build cities that are not only more efficient, but more human. Cities where people feel seen, engaged, and part of something larger than themselves. Thank you.
No leaning.
Good morning. Morning. Demographics are shifting around the world, and our housing designs and policies can be slow to catch up. On the one hand, we know many cities are grappling with housing supply challenges. On the other hand, sometimes it's the types of housing that we need to rethink. Consider this statistic. 35% of households globally will soon consist of just one person, meaning many places are reconsidering or encouraging housing types that serve single-person households. Mayor Igarashi, you've seen significant demographic shifts over the last 10 years in Tsukuba City, which was designed as a kind of hub of science and innovation. Talk about the growing number of single-person households and why that is.
Sure. As Japan's premier science city in Japan, the population of Tsukuba City has been growing. And last year, actually, we had #1 population growth rate among all the cities in Japan, although nobody tells me that it's thanks to the mayor. But you can see this graph that behind this rapid growth, the ratio of single-person households is also increasing from 38% to 44% just in 10 years. And this is driven by an increase in unmarried individuals and later marriages and the loss of spouses associated with aging population. And here we are facing a silent crisis, the disappearance of single rooms. Because Tsukuba was built as a national project, a vast amount of government-built housing was constructed for public servants and researchers. So there are many single rooms. However, as these buildings have aged and the government has lost their capacity to renew them, these lands are sold off to private developers. And now the roughly 3,000 single-person public housing units we once had in the city have plummeted with only about 100 still in use. And the private sector is not stepping in to fill this gap. So that's the situation now.
Thank you. Can you say anything more about why there isn't enough? It's because it's being, the government housing is...
Sure. Well, to understand this, we may categorize single residents into two groups. The first is the innovators, so young researchers, entrepreneurs, and artists who bring the fresh air to the city. And the second is the vulnerable, so those facing with difficulties like social hardships or economic hardships, so the elderly, the handicapped, and low-income people. At the present, the housing market is failing both groups. For the innovators, there simply isn't much incentives for private developers to build single-person housing because Tsukuba is so incredibly popular with child-rearing families, thanks to the mayor. Family housing in the current market sells out almost instantly. So developers have no need to build single-person units, which cost much extra. And for the second group, the vulnerable, there is a deeper structural problem. So to property owners, they represent typical high risk and low return. But because landlords fear the issues like solitary death or rent defaults, private investment in single-person housing comes to a halt. And so this is not just a housing shortage, it's a market failure and a crisis of urban loneliness.
Thank you. Anna, you're approaching this from a different vantage point as an entrepreneur based in Spain. Can you describe the problem that you were solving for there?
Yeah, so in Spain, the gap between housing prices and salaries has dramatically increased over the last decades. 87% of young people that rent, they share houses, they share flats. Also, it takes on average 16 years of savings to be able to afford your first home. So that's how we are already living in Spain. And the gap between how people live and how they can access the market, the real estate market, how they can own, is what led us to build habitacion.com, is that they can be able to own their spaces for a stage on their life so they can later sell that and be able to build their wealth from earlier on time, like being younger and accessing the ownership market.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Copley, in London, it's not just demographics, it's actually what developers are gravitating for. So they've been, you have a housing supply shortage, but among those builders who are developing, they're disproportionately gravitating towards co-living and student housing. Can you describe that scenario?
Yes, so the delivery of conventional residential, build for rent, build for sale, has become much more challenging over the last couple of years for various reasons, some global, some distinct to the UK, and some very specific to London, which we may come on to. And during that time, we've seen an increasing number of applications for what you could term large-scale, purpose-built shared living, or what we tend to call co-living. So that would be a sort of single room in a large, purpose-built block with a lot of shared space, so sort of shared access to kitchens, shared gyms, shared laundry, perhaps a shared garden and things like that. And it's a relatively new phenomenon in the UK and in London. We've actually seen 40% of all the applications for co-living come through just in 2024 and 2025. The London Plan has policies that relate to this. We've also published design guidance. The London Plan is very, very clear. There is a place for co-living. It's particularly suited to really well-connected areas, and I think we're going to see on the slide a scheme in East Croydon, which is very well connected. You can see that scheme there. I visited it last year. It's 15 minutes to central London, 20 minutes to Gatwick Airport, modular construction. So the London Plan does sort of set out policies related to this. We've also published design guidance. But crucially, it's not a substitute for conventional housing. It's something that provides expanded choice in the market in the right locations. And the reason why it's not considered a substitute is because it doesn't meet, the standards in the London Plan for residential around things like our minimum space standards, ceiling heights, and things like access to private outdoor space.
And what have you learned about the types of people who live in those spaces and how they're using the space?
Yeah, so predominantly, it's people who tend to be in their 20s and 30s. Although in this scheme, I mean, I was told there is a gentleman there who loves living there, who lives there, who's in his 70s. So, there are a range of people, but predominantly younger people. This particular scheme, has, for example, space with a green screen that can be used by content creators and influencers, because that tends to be a demographic that gravitates to this kind of accommodation. And I think we're also going to see a slide with some of the shared space as well, to give kind of an example of some of that shared space which is required to be delivered as part of this kind of living.
Thank you. Mayor Garashi, what is your city doing to try to accommodate single-family households?
Yes, we view single-person housing not only as a real estate, but as economic resilience, so the basic infrastructure that supports the metabolism and inclusiveness of our city. So to build this infrastructure, we are advancing some projects. And regarding the sale of former national public servant housing site, just in front of the Tsukuba station, we designated this area as a smart city model block. And now private developers are in the process of purchasing this land, and my plan is to encourage these developers to include single-person units, offering them relaxation on floor areas ratios as a bonus, under the condition that they provide community spaces on the ground floor. In short, so by building single-person units, developers can secure more floor areas than standard regulation allows. And this is how we aim to create a clear economic incentives for more single-person housing.
Great. And very briefly, you're not just confronting a housing shortage, they're also dealing with related issues of isolation and loneliness, and that's something you're thinking about as well in your policies, yes?
Sure. So to secure housing for those in need, we are establishing a housing support council in collaboration with the real estate and welfare sectors. And this council provides everything from housing consultation to rent debt guarantees. And alongside this new council, acting as a risk-sharing platform, we are leveraging our smart city framework and collaborating with our city's world-leading research institutions. So now we are proposing that the national government relax smart meter regulations, specifically to allow digital monitoring on an opt-out rather than opt-in basis. So to put it simply, smart meters automatically record a household's electricity usage in detail in every 30 minutes. By analyzing the patterns of lighting and home appliance use, they act as a life log that helps us understand the resident daily activity levels. So by seamlessly integrating this care tech into our housing support, we can detect unusual power usage patterns, so early signs of isolation or health anomalies without being overly intrusive to privacy. So this proactive technology is the key, and I'm hoping it removes the anxiety for property owners and transforming the acceptance of vulnerable tenants into something safe, sustainable, and socially meaningful. And I'm so determined to practice social prescribing through housing. So I want to use technology not just for economic efficiency, but to strengthen human connections as a mayor of the City of Science.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Copley, you have responded with some new emergency measures intended to ease regulatory barriers. Can you describe those and how you are attempting to incentivize building?
Sure. So in the year prior to the pandemic, London actually completed 45,000 new homes, which was the highest number since the 1930s. But since then, we've had a number of very acute challenges that have affected house building in London. We had rising interest rates following our previous Prime Minister's budget. We had the sort of slightly botched introduction of a new regulator and new regulations, which has led to it being very, very challenging to build residential housing in London. So the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and the government responded with an emergency package of measures designed to boost viability and delivery, a new 20% fast-track threshold for affordable housing, relief from some of the levies that have been applied to residential development, and the relaxation of some design standards around things like units per core and cycle storage and dual aspect. Linked to that as well, though, we also got additional planning powers for the mayor to be able to take over and look again at applications that have been rejected by London boroughs, and crucially, some additional funding, because we are really, really keen to use our funding levers at City Hall through things like our Social and Affordable Homes Programme, our City Hall Developer Investment Fund, to boost the level of affordable housing on developments in London.
Thank you. Anna, your company, habitation.com, was started to tackle the problem that you described and enable people to buy a room, not just a home or an apartment. Can you describe how that is intended to overcome some of the policy and legal hurdles?
Yeah, so when we built Habitación.com, it was really new. So it's our customers are young professionals in their late 20s or 30s that value low entry tickets, flexibility, and well-managed environments. So when we were building that, we encountered the main challenge of, like, the legal system assumes that property is acquired by family members or couples, but not by friends or other individuals. So the way we addressed that was first, like, through three main key layers. The first one is we didn't reinvent the wheel, so we built on top of it. We used the legal system that already works in Spain since the 80s, that is the pro indiviso. When you acquire a room, you're acquiring a defined share of the property itself. And what we built on top was the private framework, thinking of the what-if questions if I buy a room with a group of individuals. And we wrap up this legal framework on top of that to provide a clear framework of rights and responsibilities, and a clear framework for use, income, and exit, while they save up to be able to afford their next house. It's something they use for 2-3 years, they save, they sell it, and they move on to the next phase.
Great. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it for today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Buenos dias. I'm very happy to be here in Madrid. This is my home in Copenhagen. I live on a Norwegian decommissioned car ferry that I have converted into the kind of infrastructure of my family life. And of course, it's floating in the middle of the port of Copenhagen. I can see the sun setting over the King's Palace. And I can see it rising over Copenhill, a waste-to-energy power plant so clean that the steam coming out of the chimney is actually cleaner than the air of Copenhagen. So the facade is actually climbable. You can climb. It's the tallest man-made climbing wall in the world. You can also ride the elevator and admire all the technology that scrubs CO2 and filters particles from the air. And that takes you to this man-made mountain where you can hike and picnic and downhill ski. Denmark famously gets no medals in the Winter Olympics. We hope to change that now that we can sort of practice at home. The ideas behind Copenhill, we've called it hedonistic sustainability. The idea that the sustainable city not only is better for the environment, it can also be more enjoyable for the people that live in it. And the first time we discovered this was 25 years ago. We designed the Copenhagen Harbor Bath. We also designed the harbor bath in Aarhus, sort of extending the life of the city into the water around it. And when we opened it and we saw the Copenhageners, they didn't have to drive their cars for hours to get to Alicante. They could jump in the port in the middle of the city. And we thought maybe this is even part of a bigger idea. And we've called it utopian pragmatism. Architects like isms like modernism and minimalism. Utopian pragmatism, if utopia is a place so perfect it can only exist in our imagination, and pragmatism is dealing with the hard realities of the world and of life and of the city, then imagine a mindset where every time we get invited to design a space or place, we try to make this little part of the world like our dream world. And a few examples. This is the cleanest factory, the most environmentally friendly factory in the world in Norway. It's made from locally sourced timber. It's charred to protect it from the environment. We negotiated with the fire department to only cut down 5 meters of trees so the fire truck can go around. That means that the workers that make furniture, they have the sun filtered through the forest. It's made from locally sourced timber. It's heated by geothermal. It's powered by local hydroelectricity and photovoltaics. The roof is accessible as a viewpoint. The turf is locally sourced, so we maintained the same amount of habitat after the factory was finished than there was before. But you don't have to make a whole factory. This is our smallest project. It's a one-room hotel, 1 room for humans and 300 rooms for birds. You wake up in the morning to the tweeting of birds. You shower naked next to a squirrel. You are sort of immersed in nature underneath you, around you, and above you. But just to say, when we opened this 25 square meter hotel, it generated 1 billion impressions in the first months because people could really relate to this idea of immersion into nature. And from a swarm of birds to a swarm of students for Johns Hopkins, we consolidated all of their student activities into the Bloomberg Student Center on the edge of the campus. It's this kind of timber village that rests on a sloping hill. It's a building, it's a 4-story building, but you can enter it on every level from every side. So it really feels like it has the porosity and the transparency of almost like a public space. When you enter inside, a series of cascading terraces take you up along the hill, and here the students are free to sort of mingle, do their homework. They have all the different kind of activities like different clubs, theater, dance, music, etc. And it's all under this kind of mass timber canopy powered by photovoltaics, letting in the park around. So it really feels part of the campus grounds. And maybe again, like timber is such a simple way to reduce the carbon footprint of a building. The last project, before I get to Bhutan, is Zurich's new airport. It will be the largest timber building on Earth. So when you step off the plane in 2035, you can sort of smell the Swiss pine forest as you get out. But of course, it also creates a much more warm and cozy environment. And the roof is covered in photovoltaics, powering 2/3 of the airport. So all of this, like different examples of utopian pragmatism, you can almost see all of these principles coming together. This is the king of Bhutan in indigo. He invited me to Bhutan because he wanted to try to create a city to create the economic opportunity to prevent the younger generations from having to move to Australia or Canada in pursuit of prosperity. He invited me to Bhutan, this incredible kingdom in the Himalayas, as different from Copenhagen as you can imagine. The most mountainous country in the world. In Denmark, obviously the only mountains are the ones we do ourselves. The two countries are roughly the same size, both powered by renewable energy, wind and hydro. And Denmark is often ranked one of the happiest countries in the world. And in Bhutan, they measure their success as a nation on a gross national happiness index. The 9 parameters of happiness are based on Vajrayana Buddhist principles that we then translated into urban design principles. So imagine Gelefu Mindfulness City as a city that is shaped by the flow of its rivers, where the city doesn't displace agriculture or nature, but actually enhances it. That is powered by the nature and the flow of the waters, that is designed for collaboration and togetherness, and that is designed to attract international investments to retain local talent. So of course the first thing is to create access. We're building the airport. It's also made out of locally sourced timber. We take the tropical forest. Bhutan is covered by 82% forest. So imagine the forest really is the first thing that greets you when you get off the airplane. Bhutan has this very rich and very alive tradition. Like they actually have 8 large schools that educate wood carvers and stonemasons and painters. So even though it's a very modern building, we're using sort of local craft and modern technology to make sure that this kind of modern contemporary structure is really sort of saturated with the character and heritage of current Bhutan. So imagine, normally when you wait for your luggage, it's the most drab place on the planet. Here you're sort of in a tropical forest surrounded by Bhutanese carvings. And if you decide to not just stay in the airport, the city is shaped by 34 rivers flowing through it. They feed the agriculture, and they serve as migration paths for the elephants to go to India. So we decided, let's turn the rivers into central parks. We have smaller community parks that are sort of seasonal creeks. Each neighborhood becomes a terrace, almost like a rice field for living. It densifies towards the south, towards India, and where the main roads cross the rivers, they become bridges that become like public buildings. So you can see it's sort of shaped by the rivers. It's built with locally sourced materials like river rocks, rammed earth, timber. The pavements are permeable, allowing the tropical rains to seep into the ground. We've worked with local architects to sort of create a vocabulary that can actually be built by the local crafts, but also be rational and manufactured. You have living, teaching, agriculture, leisure. You have this like system of paths. You have geothermal springs and a system of paths that connects to all of the main cultural sites in all of Bhutan. The large rivers are bermed, so the seasonal flooding won't impact the city, and that creates estuaries for swimming and for habitat. Finally, the seasonal creeks are parks in the dry season, and they become creeks in the wet season. And I mentioned the public buildings, you know, they become the bridges. So you have a Vajrayana Buddhist bridge where you can listen to the teachings of spiritual masters as you cross. There's a healthcare bridge. an educational bridge. Imagine sort of a kid walking to school thinking what he or she wants to become when she grows up. Agriculture bridge, a market bridge, and a manufacturing bridge. And the sort of last element, the last bridge, is actually the main power source of the entire city. It's a large dam. It's designed in the kind of colors of Bhutan, like a modular system, almost like a Bhutanese equivalent of an Indian stepwell. We've all tried to stand on top of, I don't know, the Hoover Dam and fantasized about rappelling down the face. Here you actually have 1,000 paths that takes you down to the temple of the Temple Dam, almost like a 21st century equivalent of the Tiger's Nest. And the idea is that in some way you can say that the Temple Dam is trying to materialize or manifest like a symbol of all the values that underpin the mindfulness city. It's turning the power of nature into the power of the city. It's turning a piece of engineering into a piece of art. It's turning the infrastructure for energy into the infrastructure for spirituality. So in many ways, you can also say that the Temple Dam of the mindfulness city of Bhutan is almost like an architectural manifestation of the philosophy of utopian pragmatism.
Buenos dias. My name is Pilar Franco-Leary. I'm Executive Director of Aspen Conexión, which is a program of the Aspen Institute focused on the economic and cultural impact of the Hispanic community. I'm thrilled to be here with two cultural visionaries who are blurring the boundaries between built and natural environments through innovative installations in cities. Fátima Sánchez-Santiago, Executive Director of Centro Botín, and Cristina Iglesias, an innovative artist who creates immersive environments that merge architecture, literature, psychology, and cultural influences. As we speak, you will see images of their incredible work. So let's begin. Fátima, Centro Botín isn't just a cultural space. It's a connective one that connects the city and the bay, art, urban design, and ecology. Tell us about the steps that Centro Botín has taken to connect all of these disparate parts in Santander.
Yeah, okay. So, buenos dias, good morning. Inviting me. Centro Botín is the most important project of Fundación Botín, a foundation that was created in 1964, and we opened Centro Botín in 2017. Centro Botín is an international art center, but has a very ambitious art program, but the important part is, or the very relevant part for us, is that it has a social mission. And our mission that is very clear is to develop people's creativity through the arts. And also, what we do is not just the social mission that we've been researching for many years, for over 15 years, with the University of Yale in the United States, is how the arts can provoke emotions, and those emotions, if you manage them in the right way, you can be more creative. But it's also a place of encounter. I mean, as you can see in the images, and Pilar was saying, it's not just building a building. When Emilio Botín, the previous chairman of our foundation, went to see Renzo Piano, asked him to make a urban intervention. The space you're seeing that is now occupied by Centro Botín, it was the authority port, and it was close to the city. So the main the building, it was just connecting the city center to the Bay of Santander, making double the size of the historical Pereda Garden. So it was connecting the city with the nature through the art. The art was the link. And also it was very important to make all the space open to the community, because if we want to make people more creative, not artistic creative, but daily creativity, to develop people's daily creativity through the arts, we need to make a space that is full with well-being, as nature can give us, but also is open to art, not only on the inside, but also on the outside. And that's why we also had the artwork of Cristina Iglesias on the outside.
Thank you, Fatima. Cristina, so let's turn to you. Your artworks really function in a similar way. They are connective tissue or connective work really between the built and the natural world. What is the ethos that guides your practice, and how did that show up in Centro Botín and also in other places around the world where you've been able to create your work?
Yeah, I believe that art has the capability of becoming art in the city, a portal to other worlds, to a world of imagination, and a world that also connects the citizen with its own memory and the memory of the place. Like, I don't know if you said that before, under the pieces that I constructed, under everything that was constructed, there was water. So I created a gathering place for people to be, I create places for people to be with others, to be by themselves, to think, to share those moments, also to wait for somebody to come, but also maybe for something that you have seen to repeat. I created like an interior garden, thinking in that water that existed before down there. And so these pozos that I call like wells have a sequence of water that work with the fact of time in the let's say in the equation of perception. And that's the Centro Botín, but it's also connected to other pieces that will appear.
Do you want to say a few words about some of those other artworks? I mean, in Centro Botín, which I found amazing, it was a lost river, right? It was sort of a reclaimed river that you were able to bring back to life in a way through your art too, right? Yeah. But tell us about maybe a few words about that, but then maybe touch briefly on some of your other artworks around the world.
Yes, well, related to the piece there, for example, I think there will be an image of like this one that is the Bloomberg headquarters in London that I collaborated with Foster and Partners. And actually the piece creates, again, a space, a place for people to meet, a gathering place, but at the same time replaces the necessity of the construction of walls, protecting walls to vulnerable sites of the building. So that means that it replaced those, to construct big walls. We created these pieces that connect mentally and visually through mirrored surfaces on the bottom, at the edges of this invention of landscape that I constructed in bronze. And the water system creates again a sequence that has different moments of quietness and moments of fastness, and that activates also the way of looking to it.
Right.
And it also stops the rhythm of the city, which I think is very important, within special interventions.
That's right. That's right. And that actually it's a perfect lead-in, because I think let's talk a little bit about the public as an actor, and their engagement, because at the root of what you're both describing is a belief that perhaps for art and nature to be truly impactful or healing in an urban context, the public has to complete that process. The people who walk through your gardens, rest by the uncovered water, move through the space. How do you both think about the individual and the city community as co-creators of the work. Fatima, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like in our space in Centro Botín, Pereda Gardens is in the heart of the city, so you can just move a little bit down the city and everyone is like just going really fast, quickly, as the city is alive. And then you have this like a space for relax and you see how all different members of the community, the gardens are full of, it has every kind of person has a different connection with the art and the space. Like children relate to the pozos or the artwork in one way, and families just surround the space, groups of young people, and they all have this opportunity of just coming down and thinking about their emotions in a different way, in a different pace. It was very important what Cristina was saying about changing the way you look at things. Because if we have problems in our life or if we have challenges, which is what we are telling all kind of professionals, we deal with all different kind of professionals, is if you have a challenge in your professional life, you need to look at it from different ways. Right. And art has this possibility of making you looking at things in different ways, creative thinking, and also like understanding how you're feeling. And even, for example, animals. It is very surprisingly how even the animals that are in the gardens, dogs or birds or whatever, they relate in different way also with the artwork. So it's a fascinating possibility of just reflecting and growing through the art.
Amazing. Cristina, what would you have to say about that? The role of the public and its interaction with your work?
Well, I think, the public, the citizens actually finish the pieces because in art there are things that are not present physically, but they are mentally there. I mean, and each of us, not only accepts what you are looking at, but it brings you to another world and to a world that is bigger than what we think normally. And so art interventions can open that door again and invites the individual to look at a world that is larger and wider than what they think. And I want to believe that the pieces that I create also provoke, affects your being by putting you in an, let's say, a space where you perceive more than normally because you look more carefully. Right. Makes you look carefully and with time.
Yeah, I think we need one of your works in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, anytime, I'll do it.
Fatima, a final question for you. What does a city look like when it has genuinely let nature and the arts into its civic life? How can the leaders in this room think differently about their public space with these considerations? Because you've done that in Santander.
Yeah, I think it is very important to consider having to account the social function of art. And this is the first step, and as we have little time, what I would like to say is like, with art, you can make things improve. You can get development. Art is not just for having some fun or just looking at a good exhibition or having a good concert. Art can, if you put arts in your life, in your professional processes, you are gonna be able to think much better, to get better answers to your challenges and to improve. So if you put together green spaces with arts in cities, you are going to get development and growth and learning from the biggest leaders to the just citizens that are just living in the city. So I think it's very important to take into account the social function of art.
Absolutely. It's not just ornamental, it's really an activator for a sense of belonging. And that's what you both have achieved so well in your different missions and your work. Thank you both so much for your contributions.
Thank you so much for joining us, Alexandra and Jose. We're here today to talk about the very serious business of play and how creating spaces that work for the smallest among us actually end up benefiting all of us, not just their parents, but also the whole communities that surround them. And as part of that, we're going to be looking at 3 beautiful playground designs from all over the world to see what they have in common and the things that make them unique. And since we're in Madrid, I think it's only right that we start with Madrid Rio, which is a park built on top of a former multi-lane roadway that used to dissect the city. You are one of the urban planners that worked on this project. Tell me a bit about the impact it's had on the city and how you see the role of playgrounds within that.
Bueno, el Parque Madrid Río es un parque de algo más de 100 hectáreas que se construyó encima del
Madrid Rio is a part of over 100 hectares that was built on the lower of a road. It's a very important part for the city with ample development. It has 17 play areas that they're not necessarily different because they're destined to different ages, but they are also aimed at different games that children can play in order to develop their capabilities, both knowledge as a relationship with space, and also we're playing with water. The idea is the whole park will be a game, and the game is part of the park. It's a important part of the development, the creation of this.
Different playgrounds in action. I would love it if you could tell me, I guess, some of the different age groups that the playgrounds were designed for and the strategies that were employed to speak to these different groups.
Sí,
Yes, the different areas, as I was saying before, they not necessarily are destined or aimed at ages as like traditional games. The idea is that the child discovers the different parts of the game as they grow up and how they can get to know their own limits. And each of these games is adapted of each part of the park. So taking advantage of the topography of the park, some slides in order to go down, or within the forest, have some natural wooden pieces so that children can climb. So the different typologies are adapted to the different activities that children can do within the space, and all of them are integrated within the complex of the park. And the city is connected now to both sides of the park, whereas before it was completely split up.
Conception that playgrounds are sort of a nice to have for city leaders when actually they have sort of more important urban design decisions to be thinking about. As someone who just won the Pulitzer last year for your reporting on, urban spaces for families, I would love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, people are talking about the lack of families in cities and the lowering of the birth rate as a crisis, and I think a major way that cities can address that is by providing better facilities for families, and I think playgrounds are really at the top of the list. Everybody knows that small children need a lot of exercise, should be outside, and having great playgrounds in your neighborhood is just a huge benefit.
And I would love to look at one of your favorite playgrounds. This is the Anna Severna Playground in Philadelphia, which is actually home to the single largest swing set in all of North America. What is the significance of having a swing set this big, and what are some of the other design decisions in this playground that make it really unique?
Yeah, so this is the mega swing. It's a 120-foot by 100-foot ellipse with 20 swings of 5 different types. And what I love about this swing is not only does it provide swinging opportunities for all ages and sizes and abilities, but I think it really underlines the social aspect of swinging, which sometimes gets left out of these discussions, in that it's essentially a giant campfire. Everyone who is swinging towards the center, and there's even a setup of rocks in the center, so a parent can sit on the rocks and wave at their kid who's swinging on the swing. And this swing has been incredibly popular, both with families and with older people. This park is located near all of Philadelphia's major sports stadiums. So a lot of people have started to, pre-game and tailgate at the playground.
And as you can see in this lovely video, there really isn't much, colorful plastic or paint really in the playground at all. And instead, they've chosen to use really natural materials. You've got wood, cork, rope, things like that, really to, signal that this isn't just for kids. And we can see some of this same philosophy actually reflected in Madrid, Rio. Let's take a look at this photo of the bathing pools we have in Madrid, Rio. I think the aim really was to blend this riverside setting with the playgrounds and the bathing pools there. Jose, tell us a little bit about why that was important in the design.
Bueno, consideramos que el agua, además de ser un elemento importante,
apart from being an element, an important element from the environment area, is very important from the point of view of playing. We did a survey amongst all the schools in the area, and by a majority, children said that they wanted a beach. It was very difficult to build a beach in the river for security reasons, so they tried to recreate the effect of the seaside in nature. So within the city, what we could do is recreate that. It's an utopia to think that we can replicate nature in the city. But these are areas, very safe areas, that have different water flows. And children can play, and then can also see how the sea waves get randomly there. So the idea of all these elements, the idea behind this park is integration. The integration, not only territorial, but also the social integration, because one of the main functions of democratic space, public spaces, democratize citizens, and if children can play with children with other capabilities, different ages and different social conditions, it develops in the future a more democratic society.
Final playground for you to look at. This is the Kodomo Yume Park outside Tokyo, and the philosophy there is actually quite different in that there really isn't any predetermined equipment at all. Tell us a bit about this one, Alexandra.
Yeah, Kodomo Yume Park is an example of a junk playground or adventure playground. And the junk playground movement was started in the post-war era and spread internationally. This playground has been open since 1970, and it's based on the premise that the best playground for children is one that they make themselves. So every day you show up at Kodomo Yume Park and it's different, and you as a child can make it different. You can make your play what you want.
And we actually have a beautiful video of this playground in action for you to see, which actually brought a little tear to my eye the first time I saw it, so hopefully it might do the same for you as well.
Kawasaki-shi Kodomo Yume Park, 通称夢パ。
Kawasaki City Park of Dream Park for children. Great, you're making a house. It's important for children to be able to make and do whatever they want to do or however they do. I've done it.
Probably have space for one final question. What do you guys think city leaders can learn from the design of these world-class playgrounds that they can apply to some other urban spaces around the world?
I think that, everyone was looking for ways to be more active and more creative, and that has to flow from the smallest to the largest among us. And I think looking at these playgrounds should give everybody ideas about, what a city can do and how you can make more intergenerational environments that are active and fun.
Jose, what about you?
Sí, lo mismo.
Yes, I would say the same, particularly to reiterate what I said before. I believe that one of the main functions of a play is learn, apart from having fun, of course. And children learn playing. They learn about their limits. They learn how to meet other children, how to have relationships, and that should be promoted by the city and should be promoted by a park that integrates the child along with the different ages and the environment where it is inserted.
Good morning. Let me start by making a guess. When you first arrived in Madrid, what you noticed was not so much the buildings and the grand monuments, but how full of life the city is. The people, the movement, the loud noise everywhere. Well, that's not a coincidence. That's really the way the city was created. Madrid is a very atypical European capital. It was originally an Arab settlement that belonged to Al-Andalus for several centuries. As such, it is believed to have been a space of peaceful coexistence or convivencia between the Muslim, the Jewish, and the Christian communities. The remains of that period are still very much present in the city, in the names like Madrid or Almudena, our patron saint, in the streets, in the architecture, and in the very lively culture. But the real history of Madrid starts in the year 1561, when King Philip II, the ruler of the Hispanic monarchy, decided that he needed to found a new capital for his global empire. This was an empire that included countries from all over the world, maybe your cities too. The new capital would serve as a place to run the affairs of people all around the world and also to connect them. Now, when it came to deciding where to place this new capital, the king's advisors suggested some of the grand cities like Toledo or Seville. But instead, the king chose Madrid, this former irrelevant Arab settlement with very little population and a complete lack of infrastructures. Now, why Madrid? Well, historians haven't reached a consensus, but there's some theories that stand out. First of all, Madrid is located at the very center of the Iberian Peninsula, which for the Renaissance king was a symbolic center of the world. A center is a place that connects all the other places. The second reason is political. What Madrid offered the king that the other city didn't was a city devoid of a past, with no history, no traditions, no entrenched elites, no ruling of the Catholic Church, no fixed city walls or municipal cultures. A city that the king could invent for himself. The third reason is leisure. The king was very fond of Madrid. He owned a hunting lodge here in the city, and he would express how he enjoyed how you could rest while also doing business. This combination of business and enjoyment, business and leisure, is a very important element of the city. So it was decided that the city would be located in Madrid. And from then on, for the following centers, it became a node, a center of circulation, of ideas, of interest, of capital, of people. Of course, this new city attracted all kinds of ambitious newcomers from all over the world, from Spain, from Europe, from all the countries that were part of the empires. What they found was a city full of promise, but with almost no infrastructures. So the exchanges, the meetings had to happen in the public space, in spaces that would be taken over by sociability. Now, Madrid still lacked the magnificence of other cities. So what the king realized is that power is something that you can perform. So the first city plans were based on developing spaces where power could be seen, where people could go to look at others, where sociability would become institutionalized. The 18th century brought important new ideas from Europe. A new dynasty, the Bourbons, French kings that would marry Italian wives, who brought amazing ideas from the Enlightenment that would change the city and would make it a place more orderly and more beautiful, and that left an important legacy. They created this utopian space of connection that is the Museum Mile, a place where art has been connecting Madrid through beauty and dialogue with the rest of the world. Now, the empire that Madrid was created for faded away, but some elements that made Madrid a space of connection remained. The first one is the Spanish language, a very strong and yet invisible infrastructure that has been connecting Madrid with Latin America for 500 centuries. It has served as a network of people, of refuge, of flows, on both sides of the Atlantic. It has provided a place for people to arrive, feel free, and make it their home. Madrid has served also as a connecting bridge between Latin America and Europe. The other element that remained of the city is the spirit of the city. A city that is open, it's dynamic, it's hybrid, it's never fully shaped, it keeps changing. That has always been made in every generation by newcomers who made it their home and who contributed to the social fabric. A city that doesn't take pride so much in its monuments and its avenues, but instead it takes pride in the true capital of the city, connection. Thank you very much.
Hola, gracias por estar aquí. Para mí es un placer poder conversar este rato con Francisco.
Hello, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for me to talk to Francisco Fujiyama. He has a dual citizen from US and Spain. He went to New York when he was 16 years old, and he received many awards. But Francisco, you still have maintained that joint of two roots in your music, this spirit of being Spanish, this identity that we experience culture and music so much in our raison d'etre, and like having a coffee in a terrace in a bar is never lost. So this is a part of our identity. And you have always interpreted music as something more than the beauty that it provides, but you have always mixed this identity with a place and memory as well. As an artist, not only as a musician, well, music is an abstract language, but it is full of memories and things that the composer as well as the interpreter add to it. In my case, I always try to connect those emotional memories from my childhood, visiting the cities, the places where composers have written their work, to have a cultural as well as geographical and emotional immersion to find the essence of the music that I will interpret. That's a key word, immersion. Francisco submerges in the work of composers visiting the cities. For example, I always have the example of the Four Seasons of Vivaldi. Before recording it, I spent some time preparing the dishes of Vivaldi's time and reading everything I could about him. In this small chat, we have talked about this memory of the roots, of how they add wealth rich nuances to your music. But we must say that right now we are fortunate because thanks to you, we will be able to enjoy one of your works. This is a classic piece of Spanish music, written originally for piano, made famous by the guitar of Andrés Segovia. And we were saying yesterday that this music for me takes me back to the town of my grandparents, a small town in Granada province, and I had like maybe 5 years old, and I went hand in hand with my great grandmother and experiencing the weather, the hot Andalusian sun, and people taking refuge in the shade or with their chairs. And every time I play this, I have this immersion experience in those gardens, in the landscape, and the essence of Andalusian people. So we are very fortunate. Your violin was built in 1735. The Asturias of Albéniz was written in 1892. You were born in the 20th century and the 21st century. Right now in 2026, CityLab in Madrid, we will be able to listen to this piece. Thank you very much.